All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the pretty complicated ethical world of the modern workplace. It's a place where the line between right and wrong can get really blurry really fast. And the decisions companies make, well, they have huge consequences for all of us. And trust me, some of those decisions are happening right now in ways you might not even realize. I mean, this isn't just some theory from a textbook. Look at Apple. They've reportedly told their employees they can't use AI tools like ChatGPT. Why? Because they're terrified that secret, confidential company data could get leaked. And it's not just them. JP Morgan, Verizon, Goldman Sachs, they've all put up similar digital walls. It's just a perfect example of how high the stakes are now when it comes to data, privacy, and a company's basic responsibility to protect its stuff, and of course, its people. So, how do we get our heads around all this? Well, here's the plan for this explainer. First, we're going to map out what we're calling the modern ethical minefield. Then, we'll get practical and look at a playbook for how companies can actually handle it. After that, we'll explore the really interesting link between doing good and actually doing well financially. Then, we'll make it personal. We're talking your data, your privacy rights as an employee. And finally, we're going to flip the script and look at the ethics of the researchers themselves. Okay, first up, the modern ethical minefield. The rules of the game have totally changed. Because of the internet, social media, and this whole new era of accountability, companies just can't hide anymore. Stuff that used to be considered okay, or at least was kept quiet, is now out there for everyone to see and judge. So when we say responsibility, what do we actually mean? This definition right here is our anchor. Organizational responsibility, or OR for short, isn't just about not breaking the law. It's about being proactive. It's about actually thinking about what everyone expects, your employees, your customers, the community, and it's about focusing on what's called the triple bottom line. Yeah, economic profit, but also social and environmental performance. It's a huge shift from just asking what's profitable to asking what's our total impact here. And when organizations mess this up, the fallout is real and it's personal. Just look at the story from New York University School of Medicine. They were thinking about hiring a well-known biologist who'd previously been found guilty of sexual misconduct. The community, rightly, just exploded in protest. One postdoctoral fellow called it a cynical reality check. You can just feel the betrayal in that quote, right? It's what happens when a place says it values safety and respect, but its actions tell a totally different story. But it's not always these huge scandals that hit the headlines. A survey of industrial organizational psychologists shows the ethical problems they run into every single day. And what's at the top of the list? Conflict of interest, almost 23% of the time. Right behind that are issues with confidentiality and just basic honesty. So these aren't some abstract, once-in-a-lifetime dilemmas. This is the everyday stuff that people are dealing with at work. Okay, so you're facing this minefield. How does a company even begin to navigate it? That brings us to our second part, the responsibility playbook. And this isn't about just winging it. It's about having a solid strategic plan to do the right thing. And here it is. This is the playbook, broken down into 6 steps, called Strategic Responsibility Management, or SRM. Think of it like a cycle. It all starts with having a clear vision and values. Then, and this is key, you have to actually talk to people, your stakeholders, to figure out what they expect from you. From there, you build real programs, not just empty PR statements, and you train people. But check out step 5. That's where the magic happens. You have to institutionalize it. That means you measure it and you reward people for it just like a sales target. And finally, you tell everyone how you're doing transparently. Then you start all over again. But let's be honest, does all this effort actually pay off? I mean, really, is there a return on being responsible? That's what our third section's all about. Doing good and doing well. Because there's this old myth that being ethical is just a cost, that it hurts the bottom line. But the data? Well, the data tells a completely different story. Now, this number might look a little technical, but what it means is huge. A massive analysis that mashed together the results of 52 different studies, we're talking almost 34,000 organizations, found this positive correlation of 0.36. So in plain English, as a company gets better on social and environmental issues, its financial performance tends to go up too. It's not a 100% guarantee, but it is a clear, statistically proven connection. And when you dig into it, the business case is just staring you in the face. Let's start with customers. A whopping 75% are willing to actively punish companies they think are irresponsible. Okay, what about the bosses? 70% of CEOs around the world say that social responsibility is critical for their own company's success. And the investors? One study found the most responsible companies did over 23% better than the least responsible ones. The message is coming from everywhere. Customers, leaders, and the market are all saying the same thing. The cool thing is, these benefits trickle down into every part of the company. On one hand, you've got the big picture stuff, more money, lower costs, getting into new markets. But on the other hand, you get these huge wins with your people. I mean, when employees are actually proud of where they work, they're more engaged, they're way less likely to quit, and it suddenly becomes so much easier to hire the best talent. It's a classic virtuous cycle. What's good for the company's image is also great for the people who make the company run. All right, let's switch gears and make this really personal. Section 4 is all about privacy, data, and your rights. We've been talking about the organization, but what does any of this actually mean for you, the employee, just trying to do your job? So let's just ask the question, and it might be a little uncomfortable. Is your employer watching you? In this digital age, the answer is almost definitely yes. Companies can monitor your web browsing, read your emails, track your chats, and look through your computer files. And legally, they usually have a lot of freedom to do so, especially if you're using a company device. This is where that idea of organizational responsibility stops being some abstract concept and becomes a really important shield for your personal privacy. So, what does a fair and ethical privacy policy even look like? Well, it all comes down to two things: relevance and transparency. A company should only collect data that's actually relevant to your job. They have to be upfront and tell you exactly how they're using it. You should have the right to see your own records and fix any mistakes. And access to that data, both inside and outside the company, should be locked down to only who absolutely needs to see it. And they should be doing regular audits to make sure they're actually following their own rules. It's all about treating you like a person, not just a data point. Okay, for our last section, we're going to peel back one more layer. We've been using all this research to make our points, but what if the research itself has some ethical skeletons in its closet? So let's talk about Section 5, the researcher's tightrope. This is about the credibility of the very science we depend on. And this is where it gets really wild. This table looks a lot like the one we saw earlier about problems in the workplace, right? But this one is about the researchers. When management professors were asked about shady practices they've seen, the results are kind of shocking. Over 90% have seen or heard of researchers coming up with their hypotheses after they already knew the results. Huge numbers have seen the same exact data published more than once, or seen researchers hide important details about how they did their study. This points to a real systemic problem that kind of makes you question everything. So let's break down that number one offense, harking. It stands for hypothesizing after the results are known. Here's the best way to think about it. Imagine shooting an arrow at the side of a barn and then walking over and drawing a bullseye right around where the arrow hit. That's harking. You're not actually testing a theory, you're just making up a good story to fit whatever random patterns you found in the data. It makes pure luck look like a major discovery, and it completely undermines the whole point of science.
So, we'll end with this question. Whether we're talking about a company that's misleading its customers, or an organization that's violating its employees' privacy, or even a researcher who's fudging their data, it all boils down to a breach of trust. In this age of transparency, where everything is connected and word gets out in a split second, what is the real price of ignoring responsibility? For a company, it could be its reputation, its profits. For an employee, it could be their dignity. And for science, it could be its very credibility. And that's a price that, maybe, none of us can afford to pay.